everybody. A chipper Tim, Bonnie, and Mike here today. Welcome to the Vox Podcast, where just a bit of a weather update. It is 32 degrees in Columbus, Ohio. Tim, Auburn update.
Auburn is currently, at this moment, 67 degrees.
Nice. Bonnie, update.
And sunny.
76, but it's going to get to 83, baby.
Oh, man. Now, Bonnie, at what humidity or temperature factors do you have to then make hair adjustments?
Oh, and when the humidity gets over like 60%, I kind of got to.
Okay. You kind of got to take that into consideration.
Yeah, just throw it up.
Okay. Automatic.
Yeah, there's no questions there.
Okay.
How big does that go out?
Very, really big.
I mean, is it like...
The whole family was like, Mom, your hair, it's getting stuck in my remote control car. And I was like, you know what, you guys? So they said, you need to brush your hair out more. So I just took a comb to it, and it was like this huge thing. And they were like, never mind, don't do that.
Can we, I don't know what it's going to take, but can we get a picture of just the full-blown Bonnie someday?
We'll see.
Okay. I just want to Photoshop my face onto your face and just see what I would look at. Hey, anyway, Vox, hello. Thank you for tuning in. A couple of business items before we begin. First, as always, would you please like and subscribe and share the podcast? It is so important for our discoverability. And we're just grateful to be doing what we're doing. And so if you would help us in that way, that would be a big gift. Secondly, we're getting emails from people all over the country who want to form what we're calling micro communities, which are these smaller sort of table fellowship things that we spoke about a couple episodes ago. And so if you're interested in one of those, would you please email us at hello@voxpodcast.com. I just heard from Alexandria, Virginia, and Palo Alto, and Maine. I don't know where in Maine, just somewhere in the state of Maine. And again, from last week, Toronto, Columbus, Auburn, California, Bonnie's living room. And so anyway, would you let us know, because now that we're getting requests, we'd love to hear from other people who are in those same areas. And so hello@voxpodcast.com. Now, today, I'm excited because I threw out kind of a weird request on the Twitter sphere. And we've had, obviously, a conversation about John MacArthur's comments about Beth Moore, and we've talked a lot about women in leadership in the podcast. But we've not spoken with somebody who's a complementarian, who kind of believes that women are equal in worth and dignity, but very different in role, both in the kingdom and in the family. And we wanted to talk to somebody who and get their reaction to kind of what they heard from MacArthur. And so I threw that out on Twitter, and my friend Alan Frow responded, and man, is he articulate. And he also happens to be complementarian. And so he did a very brave thing. He just was super honest about where they're at as a church, the decisions they make in leadership, why they do that. And so I just have a ton of respect for Alan and his willingness to come in to an environment like ours, where we're obviously egalitarian. But to do, and he even says it during his interview, he wanted to make sure that people understood that the John MacArthur kind of complementarianism isn't the only kind that's out there. And
yeah.
so lots of questions and great conversation with him. And then, as always, and this was Bonnie's idea way back, we'll do kind of an outro and reflect on the interview. Anything you guys want to add before we get started?
No. Good.
Perfect. I always cue them when these big questions are coming, so they know exactly 2 seconds before. I will say that if you're new to the Vox podcast, one of the things that's been true of us from the very beginning is that when we interview people, we want their best stuff. So what I don't do when I'm interviewing people is a bunch of pushing back or a bunch of, well, how would you respond to this? I want their best stuff. So I clarify, you'll hear me go, like, and that's not always an agreement, but that's encouraging them to continue going. I really want just clarity on what they think and why they think it. Mm-hmm. So that certainly pertains here. Alan does a great job. I hardly have to ask him questions, but just as a reminder, that's our kind of approach to interviews with people. And part of the reason why we do an outro to interviews is that we then get the opportunity to process it together. So I would add that to myself. Tim, anything you would add?
Nope.
Perfect. Bonnie?
No, I feel good. I'm excited to hear it.
Then let the interview with Alan Frow commence. Hey everybody, welcome to the Vox Podcast, and today, live from Brea, California. Do you live in Brea?
I do. I live in Fullerton.
In Fullerton, California, where fires. So you got fires today.
We do, just down the road. Just down the road.
Goodness.
Pretty hectic.
This is my friend Alan Frow. Alan is the pastor at Southlands Community in Brea. And before we do anything, you know, our American audience wants to know what the accent is, because automatically you have credibility and good looks and intelligence imported to you simply in virtue of the accent. So explain yourself.
Oh man, yeah, I grew up South African. This accent, my friends do tell me, it makes me sound smarter than I am.
Perfect.
Yeah, we've lived here for 12 years. So I hold dual citizenship in South Africa and the US, proud to call US home. But all my wife and my family are still back in South Africa.
If South Africa and the US ever met in a rugby championship, which we know will never happen, but if
they have. It wasn't pretty.
No, I don't imagine it was. Who would you root for, my friend? I mean, because that's really the question.
Yeah, it would be tough. Look, I have pledged allegiance. I will go to war for the U.S. If the U.S. go to war against South Africa, I had to pledge allegiance, even though I hold dual citizenship. But when it comes to rugby, I will root for the green and gold, unfortunately.
Oh my goodness.
And I will be rooting for the green and gold this Friday night as they take on England, the colonizers, in the World Cup final.
Perfect. This is the kind of geopolitical analysis that we want. This is fantastic. Now, what brought you over here 12 years ago?
Oh, it is a long story. It began as an 18-year-old for me in a walk in a redwood forest, the Muir Woods near San Francisco. I was here as part of a multicultural team speaking on gospel and race in 1990, just the year that Nelson Mandela was released from prison. It was before apartheid came down, and we traveled to 5 states just talking about the gospel and race and reconciliation. Wow. And on a walk in the Muir Woods, it was like a burning bush moment, a burning redwood moment, and I felt the Lord just speak to me as an 18-year-old about one day living and preaching the gospel in California. And I came home to my girlfriend at that time and said, if we get married, please be open to leaving here and living in California. And 18 years later, that happened.
Do you feel like if the call would have been to Ohio instead of California, that she would have been as open?
I would have lost it. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. At that time, I had not visited San Francisco yet. I had not visited LA, Disney. We'd come to Fresno. So Fresno was all I knew of California.
Well, that is the Midwest of California.
That's right. So that's my excuse, is that I was not initially drawn by the beauty.
Okay.
And then, always assumed that we'd be in San Francisco, which I do find incredibly beautiful.
Yeah. For sure.
But that was actually not where the Lord had us. So the first few visits to LA, I didn't love LA at all. It was a big concrete jungle.
Yeah.
But obviously we have come to call it home and love it. Obviously it has challenges, but many challenges, but I'm privileged to call this home.
And Southlands was right down the street from Vox at Evie Free.
Right.
And you were a pastor there before you took it over.
Yeah, 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
And tell us just for the audience that doesn't know context, tell us about Southlands just as the church.
Yeah.
Where do you see it in the global kind of movements?
Yeah, Southlands is a 52-year-old church. So it was planted in the Jesus People movement. It was called Calvary, and
like everything else,
like everything else, it wasn't a Calvary Chapel church, but it had a kind of a Calvary background, just kind of evangelical. Many people saved and added back in the 70s, and has gone through its iterations. There was a church split during the 80s over the charismatic gifts. So that and it became more of a charismatic church during that time. It really had a strong missionary call, a school. And what we call ourselves, we're a little bit of a junkyard dog in some ways, a hybrid, a gospel-centered, spirit-empowered community on mission. So we love the gospel. We want to. The gospel is Main Street in our town, but we want to follow Jesus and make disciples in the power of the Spirit, without the crazy weirdness of some of charismatic Christianity. And we want to build family. We believe that Orange County in particular, but the Southland, Southern California, is a very isolated place, and we want to build family. The gospel gives us adoption into a family, and we want to be a family on mission. So I think one of the real keys of our flavor is that I would call us a medium-sized multiplying church, where perhaps if you gathered the congregations together, we might just count as large if we got the kids to stay for the second service and offered them donuts and put up their hand and get counted again, But we're not actually aiming for large.
Right.
We're multiplying medium-sized congregations.
Someone should write a book about that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone that's written a book about that?
That's right. There is a book. There's a book about that. And so we are a little bit of a unicorn, because only 5% of churches under 1,000 ever multiply in the U.S.
Ooh.
And I honestly believe that's the sleeping giant in the U.S., medium-sized multiplying churches. Not to downplay large or small, but I think we are poised to keep on multiplying healthy communities. So that's something for Southlands.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how is the church structured and led?
We have, so up until very recently, we had 4 congregations. We've just launched one of those as an autonomous church, and are planning to launch another one in the next year. So we are a multi-congregational church, and we are led by a team of elders with what we call plurality and consensus as high values, with the first among equals. So I lead the team that leads the church, but we have local eldership teams in each of those congregations. And so we really want to empower local teams. They preach live, they pastor their flock. And then as well, one of the nuances, and of course we're going to talk about that, we have a large team of deacons who really carry some clout, leading all sorts of ministries, and that would be made up of both men and women, married and single. And then in our eldership team, which is made up of men, we have a high value of team with our wives. So we have elders and we have elders' wives, and we lead in team together in, I think, quite a nuanced way, and I think quite a powerful way. And so that's the way we are governed.
And that kind of brings me to one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you is, given the whole John MacArthur,
Yes.
conversation now
Yeah.
back into, the complementarianism, egalitarianism debate now back sort of on the front page, so to speak, of at least my version of the Twitter sphere.
Yeah.
I was eager to talk to somebody who holds that view, but has nuance and because you don't sound like a jerk, and so points there. No. But tell me a little bit about. Sort of, was that the tradition you inherited to have kind of male only elders in the traditional sense? And then I'd love to talk just biblically.
Yeah.
Like what do you see as you look at the arguments pro and con?
Yeah. Good. Well, actually, I grew up in an egalitarian church. I grew up Methodist, and my mom has been an elder there for many years, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, and I think, one of the straw man sort of arguments against the complementarians is they're just ignorant, primitive, they don't know better.
Right.
That's what I grew up. My dad as well has served as an elder there too. But it's an egalitarian church. And I would first just say, man, this is not an order of first importance.
Right.
I love that church, came to faith in that church. My wife got saved in that church. We got married in that church, and just received so much that was good. And so this should not be as divisive and polarizing as it is today. And I think our current socio-political climate has meant that I would say this is one of the primary dividers of brothers and sisters in Christ. When we first arrived in Southern California, 2007, the primary reason why people didn't join our church was because we were charismatic. And that was the polarizing thing back then. And talking of John MacArthur, this is not the first time I've been on the wrong side of John MacArthur, because around that time he was writing books like Charismatic Chaos, Strange Fire a little later, and really full of vitriol towards anyone who spoke in tongues, So, I honor the man in the sense that he is an outstanding Bible expositor. And I just think you've got to honor what is honorable. What's so interesting with the whole Kanye West thing and his conversion and his Jesus King album, very few people know that he is being discipled by a church planter from John MacArthur's Bible College, Master Seminary,
Oh, wow.
And and so there's much good that has come out of there, but I just MacArthur is a guy who sees himself as sort of a watchman of truth and is very ready to pour fire on anything that he feels strays from orthodoxy. And I remember back in those days, and I'm telling story before I sort of lean into theology.
No, that's great.
I remember in the wake of MacArthur's Charismatic Chaos and Strange Fire, there was this YouTube clip that came out of Benny Hinn, who was one of MacArthur's primary candidates for why charismatic is chaos. And Benny Hinn had these crusades where he would smack people with his coat and they would fall down, and someone photoshopped a lightsaber, Star Wars lightsaber in his hand. I don't know if you remember that, but he walked around the stage smacking people with his lightsaber and they flew all over the place. And that YouTube, as hilarious as it was a bit of a tipping point for me and my friends, in the sense that some of my friends just went, if that's charismatic, I'm not charismatic.
Right.
And I had to say, I am charismatic, but not that kind of charismatic. Yeah. It was a tipping point, and MacArthur was kind of a catalyst for that. Yeah. Because of his critique, right critique in some ways, of that kind of charismania. I want to say that for me, listening to that interview at his conference, 50th anniversary conference a week ago, where he just spoke about Beth Moore, and you've discussed that on your podcast and said, go home, and then the laughter and the just disrespect and I just want to say completely un-Christ-like behavior. I find myself thinking this may be a tipping point for complementarians because some could go, I want nothing to do with that. I can't be complementarian, just like guys did with the Benny Hinn thing back in that day. Yeah. For me, it's actually, man, I am complementarian. I'm not that kind of complementarian. I want nothing to do with that kind of culture. And so that's what I would say is that, I mean, that's why I'm willing to go on a podcast like this, which is dangerous in some ways. Doesn't have to be. But I have wanted an opportunity just to say, man, we're not all like that.
Yeah.
And both, I think, in culture and conviction. I mean, firstly, even if you completely disagree with women preachers and Beth Moore preaching, you just don't do that. You just don't do that to women or anyone. And there's just a kind of an old boys locker room bully kind of culture that is just un-Christ-like. And I just distance myself from that. And I just loved her response, which was so gracious and so, I mean, she just didn't fight fire with fire. And I hope that he regrets what he says. I don't know whether he does. But I think as well it's important, and people like Sam Storms and others have blogged really well on just responding to the disrespect. And I think so that's been put out there.
Right.
I want to say, in terms of the disrespect, absolutely. But I would say even in terms of culture, just like there would be different kinds of charismatic, there are different kinds of complementarian. And there's nuance and there's a bandwidth. And I just want to say, man, we know that for many egalitarians, we will never satisfy where they stand theologically. But within our theological convictions, really are working hard to find complementarity. And I think that's so often what happens. Complementarianism has more to do with what women can't do than what men and women can do together. And the beautiful complementing of difference, and two are better than one, the kind of Trinitarian unity and diversity. And I just would love to explore that.
Yes.
And so, I mean, at base, you've just got to start at Genesis 1.
So what was it?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I want to sort of get into what was it that pulled you away from what your inherited culture was? Because my inherited culture was complementarianism.
Okay.
And the more I studied some of the texts, the more open I became to the alternative.
Yeah.
Was that a similar journey for you? What was that? What was that like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think again, not just church, but the university. My wife and I went to strongly feminist university, and so I think we came into marriage wrestling with the Ephesians 5 texts actually, and I know that there's all sorts of takes on that, but just couldn't get away from the fact that while there was the submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, so there's a mutual submission, you have to do theological flick-flacks to say men and women in marriage are to operate exactly the same with exactly the same roles. There are some things that are the same and others that are just different. And so what do you do with the S word, the submission word, And so we started to study that. And my wife studied at a Bible college the whole church was led by a woman. And so they had a very different take on that. And we just had to wrestle with that and just say, no, we land differently. And what is it to follow the example of Christ in terms of submission? And so, Renelle, my wife, we've been married for 25 years. She wrestled for the first decade, and I wrestled with what it was to be a husband to her, a servant leader, laying down my life. But actually, what do you do with that head word, which is not the arche sort of subjugate? It's the kephale word, which is kind of to lead as a soldier would lead a troop into battle. It's got far more to do with price than privilege, and what does leadership look like that's not about privilege and not about subjugation, but about servanthood and price. So I think that's where we started, and then found, I think, a more robust Genesis theology where, in the words of N.T. Wright, Genesis is about the combining of binaries in a complementary combination. So he says, in creation there was night and day, heavens and earth, sea and the dry land, men and women. And there was this combining of what he calls binaries. Peter Kreeft, the Catholic theologian, is echoes the same thing. Karl Barth, the fullness of being male is realized only in relationship with female, and vice versa. So there's just a history of great theological kind of convincing stuff. Even C.S. Lewis just saying, actually equal value but different role. And so we just started to say, so what does that look like that doesn't have such a narrow bandwidth that it's just Victorian? And I then came back to Jesus, who I would say was a great women's liberator, a great women's dignifier, who was friends with women, was willing to break Jewish convention by having perfume from a prostitute broken over him, by talking to a woman, at a well by himself, by protecting a woman caught in adultery. All these things that you have to say, he broke convention and yet chose 12 male apostles. What do you do with that? You can hate that, but it's there, And I think we just began to arrive at a conviction that function didn't equal value. And also that we were to be aware of male and female stereotypes. So hold a theology that can cope with Deborah the judge. And so for me, to be a woman does not mean to have no government. It just means that both in the family and also in the family of God, there are roles, and they're not interchangeable.
Okay. So that's a huge distinction. So yes, equal in value, no question. What are some examples of the things that you see in Genesis that where roles are kind of derived?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in Genesis you see dominion given to both Adam and Eve, for sure. But it's not an equal. It's not an interchangeable dominion in the sense that Eve was taken out of Adam. And Paul and Jesus used that as an argument for the differences in role. And her name is helper. I've heard you teach on this, Erre, which is a helper to a man, to her man. And that word, it's not a subjugated helper. God uses that for himself. It's actually an elevated. It's a very dignified word. And so I think our culture has said, well, if Eve was a helper, that must be less than. But actually the difference for me is dignified by God, because he uses that for the way he helps us. And so, but it is a different role. And then you see in the curse in Genesis where the curse puts Adam and Eve against one another. So this partnership, this united in diversity becomes, he shall rule over you. Which is a corruption of God's desire for a man to lead, and she shall usurp the man, which is a corruption of God's desire for her to be a helper. And so, when you see Jesus' redemption of the corruption of the curse, it's not, I believe, to nothing. In the same way that when he says in Christ there is neither male nor female nor Greek nor Jew, it doesn't mean Greeks mustn't be Greek and Jews mustn't be Jew. It's not a removal of culture. It's a redemption of culture. So neither male nor female, people often just say, so therefore there's nothing. And it's like, no, there is the fully redeemed version of the Adam and the Eve. So that's my very simplistic way of understanding Genesis. And
how do you, when you say Jesus references that, I know Paul, of course, but what Jesus passage are you thinking about?
I'm just referencing more Jesus talking about marriage. He references the
yes.
For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. So he envisioned this one flesh union. For me, that's the way he didn't.
And so do you see the Ephesians 5 submit and love or lay down your life is the reversal of the fall.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so the head then doesn't domineer but serves.
Yeah.
And the responder doesn't try to usurp but submits.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
And so look, I do believe it's dangerous to take what is mysterious and sacred in marriage and then superimpose it onto all culture. And you know, because marriage is a mysterious mirror of the Trinity, you know. And yet somehow in the family of God, the church, I believe there should be some mysterious mirroring of that. So I don't have any problem with women professors and women presidents and mayors and, you know, etc. But somehow in the family of God, there's a mysterious mirroring, I believe.
Okay.
Family, yeah.
So you would disagree with Piper and Grudem?
Yeah, I would stand aside from him.
Okay, and all they're arguing is, listen, if it's a created order thing, then that's true everywhere.
Yeah.
And you're saying it doesn't have to be true everywhere, but particularly in the redeemed community is modeled after marriage.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And so for me, very simply, and I think I have to give a little bit of a context in terms of Southlands is not big into titles. I spend much time telling our flock, please don't call me Pastor Alan. I'm just not into that, you know. And totally. So when I say we don't have women pastors, I just want to give a background to that. It's like even our men, we're not big into titles. If people say, "Oh, are you the senior pastor here?" I say, "I'm one of the pastors, but please call me Alan." You know.
Yeah.
And I think part of this conversation has got locked up into title and power. Not all of it, but some of it. And I just want to say, man, surely in the church we should be primarily thinking about family. It's the primary metaphor that God uses for his church, the family of God. And so I want to see fathers and mothers in the family. And so from my point of view, an elder, which is our term for what you might call a pastor, which part of what they do is shepherding, but there's a governing and a guarding. An elder is like a father, and an elder's wife is like a mother. And we want to see mothers come into their full call to be mothers in the church. And so to say, well, why can't a woman be an elder? I just want to say, but why do you want a mother to be a father? I just see it like that. An elder in First Timothy 3 is a man who has a wife. And so I just want to say, no, I want elders' wives to be mothers in the church and explore that. And I don't think that we have fully explored that. I don't look at our culture and say, we are there, we've arrived. But I'm saying that's the framework with which I am trying to tackle this.
Yeah. Would you ever, and this is not a setup question. I just want to know how it works out. Would you ever have a woman teach on Sundays?
We do.
Okay, you do.
And next month we've got 2.
Okay, perfect. And how do you? So some complementarians would say, "Bro, come on, man. Here's where Timothy comes in, right?"
I know.
So how would you respond to that critique?
Yeah. So for me, there's 2 kinds of teaching in Scripture. I think the 1 Timothy 2 is authoritative teaching.
Okay, so it's there is referencing one kind of teaching.
Yes,
it's teaching with authority.
With authority, okay. which again would be for me. That's not even about a man or woman thing. That's an elder non-elder thing. So I wouldn't allow a non-elder male to teach in that sort of way, which is setting doctrine, correcting doctrine, bringing government. But then there's the Romans 12. Let him who teaches teach diligently. That is non-gender. And the lead, let him who leads with zeal. So for me, there's a bandwidth for a gifted teacher and leader who are non-elder to lead and teach, but not in the way that is governmental, in the sense of correcting doctrine, setting new doctrine, setting new vision For me, that's an elder role. Now, again, you can disagree, others can disagree, but that's the reason I give to our congregation why we will have non-elder men and women teach on Sundays.
Mm-hmm. It's gifted, not office.
Yeah.
At that point.
That's right.
But there is a unique office.
Yeah.
And teaching that comes from that office.
That's right. And not all our elders have that either.
Right.
So,
because it's the combination, right? It's the gift
gifting
of
and
teaching
office,
and the office.
Yeah. So 1 Timothy 5, let the elder who rules well, whose job is preaching and teaching, receive double honor. And so there's a job of preaching and teaching for me that is an elder's job. Mm-hmm. And then we call in gifted non-elder men and women to teach too.
What do you, when you look at the egalitarian position, and as always, there are varieties, but just talk in the most general, overly simplified terms, what do you see as some of the great weaknesses?
I think probably, Mike, one of the weaknesses is a loss of team. I've got a friend who leads a church in our city, dear friend, who's egalitarian. He's an outstanding man. He's pastored here for almost 30 years, and he's got a doctorate, and he's just amazing. And he said to me one day, I disagree with your position, but I have to say I envy the sense of team that you have with your wife. And he said, my wife is a pastor. She does worship and women's ministry, and I love the fact that she carries that same title and role, but we pass like ships in the night. And so I think that what he was essentially saying is, we're not a mother and father in this house. We ministers. And I see something of it. So, my wife and I last night were counseling 2 new believers who joined our church. I baptized them both in the last year. They joined our church as a young couple who were pregnant, and we're doing premarital with them. And I just go, I can't imagine doing this without Ronelle there. And she's mothering. Not just the women. She's like Priscilla, with Priscilla and Aquila, teaching the man as well. For me, there's a mother voice that's so vital. So I think that's the one thing that gets missed. Not always, but I see it missing. And I think the other thing I see is a tendency to not realize that there can still be abuse of women in egalitarian churches.
Oh, obviously.
So, it's very easy to look at the complementarian thing as egalitarians and say, well, you're not giving women authority or opportunity, so there's abuse. But, again, I don't want to point fingers, but the recent Willow Creek Highball fiasco, he just appointed a woman senior pastor, but there was terrible abuse of women behind the scenes. So I just think to be careful to not be self-righteous and go like, well, so there'll be no abuse of women because we're giving them position,
right,
and power.
So, what about theologically? What do you think? What are some of the weaker arguments you've heard?
I think some of the weaker arguments I've heard are when people teach Genesis 3, where they look at the curse and they say, well, see, Jesus redeemed that curse. And so then they just flatten everything out because Adam ruled and she usurped. And so Jesus flattens everything out. And I'm just like, what do you do with not just Ephesians 5? What do you do with 1 Peter 2, where Peter talks to husbands and says, treat the woman as a weaker vessel, which even that is you've got to be careful with what that is. That's like a fragile vase, which is more costly, and if you don't, your prayers will be hindered. And so those are tough ones in our day and age, but they just kind of cut and paste that. I'm just saying, man, at least wrestle with that. Please wrestle with that. What does that look like? So generally, marriages in our church that have chucked out any degree of submission and leadership, there's often real tension around decision making. Real tension, because there's no one who has a tie-breaking power. So you ask me, I've been married for 25 years, how many times I've actually just said, okay, I'm the leader, I'm going to zero. Zero. But there have been so the vast majority of our decision making is us collaborating. But there have been probably 5 occasions in 25 years when Ronell has said to me, "You're the leader. Go and hear God."
Right.
We can't agree. And I have done that with fear and trembling at that point. Mm-hmm. So I see egalitarian marriages lacking that. They get paralyzed often.
Do you so this is an interesting question to me. So if the elder board and the home are models of the same sort of reality.
Yeah.
On the elder board, you operate as a first among equals by consensus.
Yeah.
But then in the home, there may be instances, where the man makes the decision. Is that true on the elder board too?
Yeah.
If the elder board's deadlocked,
I would have
same scenario play out.
Tie-breaking power.
Okay.
And but in our what's it called? Minutes. Bylaws, in our bylaws, there are some aspects like major financial decisions, major doctrinal decisions, major ordination of new elders, planting of new churches, where I do not have tie-breaking power, where if there's not consensus, it ain't going to happen. So it's limited power. But there have been moments where guys have said, man, we've talked, we're in stalemate. Al, go and hear God. We're giving you. Again, I've led here for 9 years. I can count those times on my hand.
Totally.
But again, what's hugely helpful is every second week, we meet every week. Every second week, we meet with our wives because they're mothers in the church. And often the woman's intuitive gift helps us with big decisions. So at that time,
so they're just providing wisdom.
They are. They are. It's what I would say. It would be perspective, and often it's strong perspective. We've got some very, very strong wives. As well as that, we have a financial council of non-elder, both men and women, where on big financial stuff, we will go to them and say, help us with this. But it's really, it's not tokenism. It's receiving counsel from them. And then they say, okay, we trust you. You go and make the decision. And now I know that's not going to satisfy every woman. I'm just saying, I think many egalitarians don't realize that there might be some nuance to the way this works itself out.
Well, that's why I wanted to have this conversation. What are some of the other stereotypes that you think egalitarians have of complementarians? So one would be they're monolithic, and there's no nuance. One would be there's abuse, and it's only that direction.
I think the other would be they are their wives or the women are introverted, non-career, non-ambitious homeschoolers. And I just want to say, man, we have got some such wonderfully high-powered ladies that I just celebrate. It's just amazing, that are better known in government and business and education than any of our elders. I'm just like, man, I just want to make space for the Phoebes and the Deborahs and the Esthers and the Priscillas. There's nothing wrong with a strong woman. There's plenty wrong with a weak man. And to be honest, I know the complementarians, many of them are kind of locker room, or they come across as locker room bully boys. I would say in California, I find the exact opposite stereotype, where the average couple we sit with doing marriage counsel or premarital, the woman is a more naturally strong leader than the man. And the man has lost confidence because any strong leadership as a man is made to look like chauvinism. So honestly, I mean, I would say a stereotype of it's the weak, demure woman. That's just not true. And then I would say the other stereotype is in ministries here that women would primarily be in children's ministry and counseling, and that's it. So I would just say, beyond teaching, we've got directors of children's ministry, but a lot of our most powerful mercy and justice stuff is led by women. On our financial council, women. Life groups are led by single women. Worship teams led by women. And so, some very strong ministry women.
Could a single man be an elder?
We have done that before.
Got
and
it.
it hasn't worked well. So
okay.
not by theological conviction, no.
But more just
but
wisdom and
in
perspective.
23 years, I've seen it. Seen it twice, and both times those guys fell terribly. So I don't know, man. Just by experience, I'm cautious, but I can't make a law about it.
Yeah. When you say, so nothing wrong with strong women, but there is something wrong with weak men.
Yeah.
That will strike some as, okay, well, here comes the Driscoll, sort of definition of masculinity.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
One of the stories, Mike, that I love, just that points to the grace of God, because we know that God is always overturning social convention, and he shames the strong because his weaknesses, his powers made perfect in our weakness. So if you look at the Jacob and Esau narrative, where the alpha male Esau, hairy hunter, favorite of his father, was supposed to get the birthright, and who got it? It was Jacob, a smooth mama's boy who was in the kitchen, who hated hunting, and he was scheming, and the Lord gave the birthright to Jacob. And yes, there was some character working out for Jacob. God gave him a limp, and his name was changed from schemer to wrestles with God, etc. But for me, I really rail against the Esau definition of what it means to be a strong man, because actually Esau had his own weakness.
Absolutely.
And it was he was hot-blooded, and he made rash decisions, and his appetites got the better of him, etc. So to say, well, Esau is strong, it's like that's locker room kind of stuff. It's more narrow than Scripture is, because the Lord somehow chose Jacob. And I mean, you and I are both Gen Xers, I think.
Absolutely,
and we
and
tend
proudly.
And we tend to get grumpy. I do, certainly, about millennials, or iGen being more sort of snowflake and soft and whatever. And I do have that concern at times. But I just think we've got to be really careful not to superimpose a cultural definition of what it means to be a strong man. Jesus is our example of what it means to be a strong man. And I think, yes, Jesus turned over temples, but he also wept at his dead friend's tomb, and was comfortable having conversations one-on-one with women. One of my big problems with the strong man thing is that they are so uncomfortable having conversations one-on-one with women. And it's just, that's not biblical masculinity.
Come on.
I think that's partly because of the Billy Graham rule, never have a one-on-one with women. It's actually, I get it morally, but it's actually robbed women of dignity, and what I've found is in our church, there are many women that are fine with our church government, but what they want some FaceTime with me. And they don't want to feel like they are just like a temptation to me, So what is it to treat them like sisters with absolute purity, but have a good relationship with them?
Come on, Timothy.
And I've tried to do that. I don't know if we have, but I've tried to set that culture. We need to change that culture.
Alan, listen, I'm very grateful that you are willing to step into this, because it really is easy to caricature, really is easy to stereotype. Nuance, Christianity isn't known these days for its nuance in conversation.
True.
So thank you for just kind of opening up your church and your beliefs to conversation. I'm very, very grateful for that. If people are going to find you online, where would they find you? alanfrow.blogspot.com. Oh, spell Frow.
ALANFROW.
There it is.
And it's just a link on at southlands.net. Is our website.
Yep.
And you can find my most recent book on Amazon. It's called
That's what I'm talking about. What was that one? And what was that one called?
Broken for Blessing.
There it is.
The underrated potential of the medium-sized multiplying church.
Boom. So that was the medium-sized multiplying joke I was making earlier.
That's
I was like, come on, baby. Come on. So Alan, my friend, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks you are a fantastic interviewer. You are excellent. It's a pleasure to.
Bro.
Thanks for your open heart and clear mind.
Oh. Well, I'll give you 1 for 2, but I won't tell you which one. All right, so hold on. I'm going to turn off the recording stuff, and I'd just love to say thank you personally, all right? So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Alan, I think, is incredibly articulate, and this is kind of the complementarian view that I come from, right? This was my view. So in some ways, he's nuanced it in some unique ways, and they practice it in some unique ways. But this was kind of the view that I evolved into kind of out of seminary and into the practical church leadership. So the biggest thing is just kudos to him for being specific when it's really easy not to, and just to avoid, the questions that might make some uncomfortable. I have such respect for how he and his community just want to follow the text regardless, even if it's not incredibly popular. And so anyway, I appreciated that very much, and his willingness just to come on and talk about it. So, Bonnie, what were some of as you listen to that, what were some of the things that surprised you, if anything? Anything that you particularly thought, oh, that's a good point? Anything along those lines?
Yeah, well, first, that his view of complementarianism actually was a little bit more progressive than the one I inherited. So for me, even the fact that he really values partnership, and when he was talking about that, his seemed actually a lot more progressive than the one I was used to follow. So that was kind of interesting for me to hear, because I haven't heard that nuanced side of it. So that was neat. And one thing that I just made me think was when he was discussing his relationship with his friend, who is the egalitarian pastor, the pastor's friend. And his friend said, I disagree with you, but one thing I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like he said that I'm jealous of, or that I envy, or something like that. Yeah.
The sense of team.
Yes, the sense of team. Yeah. And that was fascinating to me, because the question I would ask there, and not to disagree, but just to probe deeper, would be, at what point is that part of the system, or is that part of the people? If that makes sense. Totally, because some of these things are just different in marriage. Like, my husband and I have been on very different career tracks. Sometimes they intertwine, sometimes they not. But sometimes we act like more of a team than we don't, just depending on life stage, or you know what I mean? So for me, when those kind of questions come up, the thought I have is, how much can we attribute that to this system that we're following, or theology that we're following, and how much can we attribute to just personality? Honestly, I don't know.
No, I think that's a good point. I remember I very much tried to make Justy a pastor's wife, and based on whatever expectations there are, like,
you just
of
heard
course,
about.
we're gonna do ministry together, and it's gonna be amazing, and we're one flesh, and it's gonna be awesome. And no, not even remotely at all was it those things. In fact, there was a sense in which she was not called into my ministry, which is what I was trying to do. She was called into her own.
Right.
And so I get what's being said there, that, if the view is that we're eldering the church together, I think I have a lot of respect for that. I think that's wise. It's something we tried to implement at Rock Harbor too, was that that the spouses they had significant wisdom and input, mothering, in his words. But man, I like just being on staff and not an elder. So just being a pastor, to try to figure out what that looked like, and to try to sort of put that expectation on her was hard for us,
Right. Yeah.
It didn't. So I'm with you in terms of.
That's just a question I would ask in my own marriage. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, if we were having conflict or something like that when it came down to leadership. And the other question I would ask there, I guess the same thing, would be the starting point for those conversations. So if you were in a church, or like say it was me and my husband, and I was trying to decide if I could, like, we thought it was biblically okay or theologically acceptable to become a woman in ministry. And we had conflict. I would ask what that conflict was, like where it stemmed from. Is it because we didn't believe the same things biblically, or was it just because we were both trying to be leaders and that is tough? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yep. No, I think that's really good. That's a great question. I didn't.
Yeah.
That didn't jump out at me, but I'm also, what did jump out was the temptation, I think, to see myself as central, and that her world orbits around mine. And so that what team turns out to mean in that circle is that she's my helper rather than me being her helper and whatever her ministry is too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Or
But
that one's more important, or that one has to take precedence.
Yes.
Or
Yeah. And Alan would never say that, nor would people who are biblically nuanced in any way, that it's not at all an issue of importance. But he was like, men and women in marriage are not exactly the same, and they don't have exactly the same roles. And that's also true in the church, because they both reflect kind of the mystery of the Trinitarian God. I loved what you said, like, that doesn't mean we force that onto culture. Like, that's a great step away from the consistency of guys like John Piper and Wayne Grudem, who argue, listen, women should never be an authority over men anywhere. It's a violation of their design. It does violence to them, just by, having a female boss and a male subordinate.
Right.
So, hallelujah, we've moved on from that one. But for him, and Bonnie, I want to know what you think of this. So these are not, so they're both given domain, but it's not interchangeable domain. So one of the things I consistently heard him express in several different questions was the flattening of any differences between male and female, in the egalitarian sort of, how you would work egalitarianism out practically in the church, right? So he talks about men and women aren't exactly the same, or don't exactly have the same roles. The roles he talks about they're not interchangeable. The domain is given to both, but it's not interchangeable domains. So as you're processing through that, what do you hear? I mean, do you think there's truth to the we are complementary, and we can say that there are differences built into us in virtue of being male or female?
Yeah, I think for sure that's obvious, even just in having children. Right? Like, that's an obvious difference there.
But you're saying that's bigger than physical.
Right. No, yeah. So what I'm saying, though, is because of that physical difference, there's a different way that I connect with the kids, or I look at the kids. Like, there's a mothering, like, in that sense, that's different than a fathering. That's for sure. I've just witnessed it and experienced it. But something I would question is the way, the importance of, and I learned this from Gombis. I mean, there goes the game.
There's the
again.
Drinking game.
Exactly. I learned this from Gombis, but to what degree we're putting our idea of a nuclear family on the church? That's a question I would have, because I'm not sure that is for me to say, well, my family is then mirrored in the church or whatever. That's fine for me as a upper middle class white family in America, but that's not the case for everybody. The nuclear family, like husband, wife, 2.5 kids, that's not what is happening for a lot of people in the world. So I would wonder about that. But I would
hold on. Nope. Can we stop there? I think that's a really. Were you going on to a separate point?
Yes.
I wanted to make sure. Okay. I want to hit this, Bonnie, because I think as you're saying it, I'm going, ooh, that's really a big deal, because one of the things I took from the interview that I really but agreed with, is the idea that there should be mothering and fathering.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think you have to have both.
shepherding of children and shepherding of the church, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the way he's framing mothering and fathering is around the idea of marriage, which he would say is the reflection of this Trinitarian mystery that exists in the church, according to Paul in Ephesians.
Right.
And so that the mothering and the fathering have to come from husbands and wives who are married to each other. Whereas what we would want to say is that the first century household was not bound by that framework, so that there could be mothering and fathering from other members in the household and not just the husband and the wife. Is that what am I picking up what you're putting down, Bonnie?
Yeah, yes. No, you're exactly right. That's exactly what I would say, is that our definition of it is different than the first century. So I hesitate there, just wondering how much we're putting onto that. And then if so, if we say, if you do land on, no, it is, our definition is the same, then what do we do with people who are single moms or who are widowed or widowers? Or like, what do we do in that situation? Are they then excluded? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Yeah. It kind of breaks down. For me, I wonder about that, and I can't speak to it because that's not my situation, but I would then go to those people and ask them and hear their voice in it. Right.
So a question would be, if the household of God doesn't mean the American house, and there is, but I would imagine he would say, hey, listen, but there is this Trinitarian mystery involved between husband and wife and church and Christ that isn't true everywhere else, right?
Yeah.
And we'd agree with that. And then our response would be, but, and he spoke to this a little bit about a single man. He's like, well, there's nothing that says you couldn't be a single man, but wisdom, his experience has suggested that there's something about there's something about marriage that matures or seasons us in ways that you don't get otherwise, unless you're an exception.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can see that. I wouldn't want to press the point too much, but I think the Gombus Bonnie point, or as I call it, Bombus, is the. I think that's an interesting thing I'd want to spend more time on.
Yeah. Well, and I think when I heard mothering, fathering, that language he used actually really spoke to me, because I was like, that makes a lot of sense. But the way I view it as making the most sense or bringing the most full picture is that we want a mother and father because God is in both male and female.
Yeah. Yes. No question.
So for me, when it's for better or worse, it went beyond the role question and going, oh, but for me, that's because this is what God is like. Do you know what I mean?
We would agree. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where there can be a misunderstanding of some forms of the egalitarian position, where we're not saying mothering and fathering is the same thing. It's not the same role. It's not the same job. It requires different sets of somethings, right?
Right.
Those aren't interchangeable, is what we're saying. So we agree.
We agree there, yeah.
We agree with mothering and fathering are different things. Absolutely. We're not going to stereotype them or straitjacket them according to 20th century versions, 21st century versions of mothering and fathering. So that, I think that's a legitimate counterpoint. But nor are we going to say that, listen, mothers and fathers are interchangeable. Nope, they each bring something unique, and that is why it takes both of them to reflect the image of God.
Right. So, like, for example, I would never say, some people will say to me, like, oh, you're just a feminist. You don't want men in power. And I'm like, no, I want equal power, because we both are equally important. So just as I feel, if you have a church and it's only men, you're discounting half the church. The same would be true if it was only women. You're discounting half the church. Right. So
look at you go.
I know.
Funny.
But that is true. So if we want to have this big picture, it has to be both. So it's tough for me, because I don't necessarily, when we talk about roles, is where I would say I have a question there, is that I would go, well, I do think in terms of mothering and fathering, like we said, they're two distinct roles, but they're both needed.
Right.
That both voices are needed.
So it actually turns out to be an argument for why women should be included in leadership, and why he, even though he's a complementarian, insists on having wives at half of their elder meetings, but just not in a very specific function.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting.
What do you think in Stafford? I can't read your bearded face.
I think I grew up in this mindset, or in a church but I didn't know these names or these terms forever. Complementarianism wasn't there. It wasn't on the church bulletin.
No, it was just it was the biblical view.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't feel like I don't remember anyone actually saying that. It was just by example that no woman ever taught. Right. Women ran the children's ministry. They'd march the kids up to sing a song at whatever point in the seasonal year or whatever, or maybe made announcements or ran a women's Bible study or something to that. But they were never up there doing anything that was like in a leadership role. Right. But with this, I'm curious, and I'm asking you guys, is it a matter of semantics? Like, is it titles? Because it's like, yes, no, we will let women teach. Yes, we want their wisdom in these meetings, and they play this role. Is it just like, but we just won't give them the title of?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. No, so great question, Tim. And I want to jump in for Alan, even though he might not answer this way. This is how I would have answered. There's a difference between office, and gifting. And so what he might say, or what someone from this camp might say, is that listen. What Paul prohibits, and again, we didn't get into the exegesis of this passage, but what Paul prohibits in 1 Timothy 2 is a kind of teaching. Not all teaching, because you have 1 Corinthians 11 where women are prophesying in the assembly. But when he says, I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man. So is that and there, teach and have authority? Are those two separate things, or is that one thing? And Alan's saying, no, it's one thing. It's a kind of teaching that has an authority that only belongs to the elders in the Bible. And so women can come, they can serve, lead, teach, whatever their gifts are, absolutely. But notice he said there's this other function in the church of doctrine, guarding doctrine, preserving doctrine, correcting doctrine, that kind of exercising discipline. I would imagine that is for males. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that was kind of, to go back one step to MacArthur, that was a lot of the narcissism. Like she just, right as I'm asking, is that what when he was just like, she makes it all about her. She puts herself into
the text. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that what he's arguing? Is that kind of idea that, I don't know.
Well, he may hold, there's an older complementarian view that no one in their right mind articulates today. But that women are just more easily deceived. And so Paul seems to hint at that, although I don't think he is. But that women are more gullible and are not, need to be protected and shepherded because of that differently. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Can I throw a wrench in these questions? I just thought of it.
Do it.
So in the culture that we have now, we have a lot of people that go to church. We have a lot of people that don't go to a church. So if you find yourself as a Christian, but you're not in a church, like Beth Moore, for example, right? Okay. What is their problem with Beth Moore in general? Is it that she's a pastor at an actual brick and mortar church? I don't think so. I think it's the wider global church. So my question to you, Erre, is in this context and in these conversations, is Paul talking about like these communities, or is he talking about the bigger thing? Because I know women that don't think women can be pastors or elders, but then they have a huge preaching ministry.
Right.
Outside of a church. So me, I'm like, I don't get that. Like, I don't know. So what do you think there is? Is this global church? Is this?
That's such a great question, Bonnie. The distinctions. So the distinctions that we make between church and not church didn't exist back then.
Right.
Right? I mean, church was a people, and you belonged to that people or not, whether or not you showed up. You know, if you were a Jesus person, you were part of the church. And not only that, you had itinerant speakers, obviously back then, some of whom hurt the gospel, some of whom helped the gospel. And then you have the idea, and this is where I think there was the big pushback on the Jen Hatmakers and the Glennon Doyles and that whole tribe, Rachel Held Evans. Like, these are women that are not operating under any ecclesiastical authority. And so in the same way that we would, that you know, it's easy to just sit on the sideline and podcast, but you should be suspicious if you're not involved in a local body and under that authority in some way, shape, or form. That the women who are exercising these huge ministries, even if they're not involved in the church, it's not even a male-female thing. It's just, hey, they're operating under no ecclesial authority at all. So if they become false teachers, there's nothing there to correct or disciple out of their false teaching. Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally makes sense. What you're saying makes sense. I understand what you're saying.
So I think
Paul's
referencing the local communities, right? That's his context.
Right.
He's not addressing. He had no idea there'd be podcasts and Christian women's conferences and whatever else.
Yeah.
And we do have some of those global speakers who speak only to women. Okay. So I don't know that we can take Timothy's words and say true for everyone at all time the way some complementarians do, right? That's one of the areas of disagreement we'd have. But there is something, and call me a fundy, but doggone it, there is something to being in relationship with other believers and working out this application and doctrine. There's something about that that's super important.
Agreed.
I think the important part of that is the working out part. I just don't know that the working out part's happening a lot.
Say that more.
Well, just that. I have a really big question here, and I don't know if I want to ask it. Well,
Bonnie just threw a wrench. Do it.
Well, I don't want to take us off track.
Do it. There's no track.
There's no track.
There's no track.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking. Okay, let me back that up one more step. I went and saw a very well-known, prominent Christian author, pastor, speaker. And he was kind of trailing off into this reading a lot of the texts about judgment, like really kind of right off the surface, and he really went into this judgment stuff. And it was throwing me all over the place. I was just like, I don't know how to process this. I don't know how to deal with this. And his point is just kind of like, we don't pay attention enough to the scarier aspects of the Bible because we don't like to talk about it. And then I've been thinking about how, like, we're in constant revelation, right? We're constantly, like, Mike, you've changed your viewpoints on certain things that in the past may have been deal breakers, and now it's like, well, I kind of don't think that way anymore. And so, and just using you as an example, but that's been kind of the trajectory of a lot of Christianity, right? Like, we keep learning new things, and some of those things would have been either heretical or they would have been like, you're going to hell for this. And now we're like, well, I don't know. So this idea that we base our salvation on some really big tenets that tend to change, I'm struggling with this idea of what actual judgment means and what actual, like, does that make sense? These conversations are happening all the time, and I think as now that there's podcasts and there's voices and people are wrestling with big topics, and it's just like if everything's shifting and we don't really, like, listening to Mackie, and it's like, he's just peeling layer after layer off the Bible, and we're like, oh my gosh, didn't know that was that way, and oh, this is this, and that changes the way we look at this or hear this, and it's like, well, if that's the case, how do we process and live in all of that kind of stuff? And I say that I wrote that question down in frame of other things from this conversation, so it's not too far off track, I hope.
Oh,
Tim's asking if I'm going to get smited. That's what Tim's asking.
Or smote? Is it smote?
Smote.
Says Moana.
What do you think, Bonnie? Why don't you take a crack at that one?
No.
I know. I told you it was a derailer.
No,
and I had
not
more
at
stuff
all.
that was in line with.
No, it's just big. I don't know. I would rather respond to Erre's
Oh boy,
thing.
I have thoughts.
Share the thoughts.
One, so there's a tension that exists even in the Bible that we have to respect both sides of today. One part of the tension is that there is an authoritative eyewitness tradition about what Jesus said and did that was handed down by the apostles and to their disciples and to, now codified to some degree in the scriptures, right? And I only say to some degree to make room for people who aren't sure this is the word of God. And so Christianity, as we've talked about before, it's a received and revealed faith, right? It's not something we get to make up as we go. Right. So that is a very strong tenet. So there is a very real sense in which you can riff all you want, but at some point you're no longer talking about Christianity, the historical apostolic religion. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's true. That's absolutely true. And on the other side of that tension is the ongoing work and movement of the Holy Spirit in the missionary impulse of God to draw all nations to himself. Mm-hmm. And, so you see that there are all sorts of examples of it, but you see that when Jesus is correcting some Pharisaical theology in Matthew, when he's talking about you've heard it said, but I tell you. Mm-hmm. You see that when Jesus actually says, hey, by the way, that concession on divorce, that was a concession. That was not the ideal. The ideal's in Genesis 1 and 2. He says that in Matthew 19. You get that even when, Paul and the author of Hebrews, talk about how Jesus is kind of the full and final revelation of God, even though God had spoken before, right? Hebrews 1, God had spoken to our forefathers through prophets and others, right? But now at this time, the fullness of his son has been revealed in Jesus. So there's a very progressive sense, or even the maybe paradigm example is when Peter is on his rooftop and he sees the unclean animals, that the law will really clear. Those are unclean. Those are not fit for you. But then the Spirit's doing a new thing. Now, the new thing turned out to be a thing that was promised in the Old Testament, right? Mm. And I think that, so a couple of thoughts. First of all, I don't think we get to riff on the main stuff. Now, the big debate, of course, is what's the main stuff. We've had conversations about that. Secondly, I do think we get to look at facets, and what guys like Mackey are doing, are they're revealing facets that have been flattened out through 2,000 years of tradition, but particularly the last 500, where they're saying, hey, this has always been here. It's not like we're riffing on new stuff. This has actually been part of the old stuff, because we're looking around and saying Christianity doesn't seem vibrant. It doesn't seem powerful. It doesn't seem experiential. It seems sort of shallow and hollow and empty, and certainly not forming people who look like Jesus. And so it's quite natural to go back and say, well, somewhere we got off track. And so I think what people like Mackey are doing aren't riffing on new stuff, but I think they're revealing stuff that's been there the whole time, but for cultural reasons and others, we've turned a blind eye to along the way. Make sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. When you get to the highest view of the Bible, I think, isn't the view that just says it's static, perfect, and it was just like written on gold tablets and handed to us word for word. The highest view of the Bible is the interplay, the recognition of the interplay between the human author and audience and authors and the divine presence through the Spirit of inspiration. And what I mean by that is God accommodates, like we've talked about before, to the culture in many, many ways, because it's triage, while at the same time still pulling us forward into the future. And you get that in the Bible. So you see this tradition bit that we don't get to riff on, but the Spirit is moving bit, and the Bible doesn't cover these issues on some of the things we're wrestling with. And so we have to trust the Spirit and to improvise out of our comfortability with the Word. Is this making sense so far?
Yes.
Yep.
Thoughts, Bonnie?
I don't have it. I'm just listening. I'm just listening. I'm waiting. I don't have extra or countering thoughts.
Okay, well, as a translator of the Bible, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for thoughts. So Tim, does this make sense? Does this make sense so far?
Yeah. Yes.
But it raises all the practical questions of, well, what things do we get to riff on and what things do we don't? And to me, that is the place where the working out that we talked about has to happen. Right? I don't have to work out, is murder wrong? I don't have to work out, is God somehow three and God somehow one? I don't have to work, like even if I don't understand that, that's part of the received tradition.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Now there are different ways of processing that, but that's an internal. That's once you're inside the club. Now you're having these really fascinating conversations about Greek words and ancient councils and all those sorts of things. But the simple idea that Jesus is somehow divine and human, that's you lose one of those, you've lost Christianity. You know what I mean? Like that's one of the centers. The thing that's been most helpful for me in the riffing part has been what we've talked about before in terms of N.T. Wright's 5-act play. I won't go into that again because we've covered it before. But it's the idea that we're improvising a lot of the practical application of our faith. And so and what Paul's doing, and this is what blows our mind, is Paul was improvising too.
Yeah.
So Paul's improvisations became Holy Writ for us in ways that I wonder sometimes if Paul would appreciate or not. But Paul didn't know. I mean, he will even say this in his letters. He's like, well, I don't have a command from the Lord, but I, as someone who's trustworthy, would say. Right? What's he doing there? He's improvising. This is a situation Jesus didn't cover. Mm-hmm. And so in the midst of his authority, as he was submitted to the apostles, there was this idea that, man, we're working this out as we go. And evidently that's exactly what God wanted or else he would have given us an encyclopedia of Jesus' teachings about every facet of human life. Right? So he wants our participation. And so then you get into, well, what's it mean when Jesus says his followers will bind and loose things? Whatever they bind in our earth will be bound in heaven, and loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And, our Catholic friends would say, well, that's actually that's real stuff. Like the church, the apostolic church has the authority to set policy on things. As Protestants, we don't take it that far, but there's a sense in which we're riffing under the same conditions, right? Mm-hmm. We've got so for me, there has to be, or you've lost the attention. There has to be a place where you can say to somebody, that's not Christianity. That's just not. I don't mean it's not my version of Christianity. I just mean it's not at all what was handed down to us as authoritative. Right. There has to be that piece to this. Mm-hmm. And again, Paul is our model here. There are times when he says, I, not the Lord. Other times he says, listen, I passed on to you what was given to me. Right? Here's the communion tradition. Here's the Jesus resurrection tradition. So you got to keep that thing. So that gives us our guardrails, Tim, to say, okay, I can believe the Bible is authoritative and inspired. That belief hasn't changed. What has evolved over the course of time has been what inspiration and authority means. Right? I'm more passionate about the inspiration in the Bible and the authority of the Bible than I ever was when I held some dry sort of static view of it. Make sense?
Yeah.
Is this in any way progressing towards the topic? Just give me that much.
Yeah. It's like, well, I remember conversations, not this conversation, but the conversation, this idea of complementarianism versus egalitarian, like these titles, these factions, these broken factions under the Christian umbrella that grade against each other and cause all this friction and anger and infighting and kind of argumentation over specific things has always bothered me.
Yeah.
I think that's why I've never liked titles at all, because they're too inclusive in a disappointing and harmful way, and from what I've seen. So I'm always just like, well, I don't know, but it's like there may be this core group of things at the center that are like, yeah, these are non-negotiable. But then we start going out of there, and it's just like thunderclouds of friction on these things. It's like, well, this is going to send you to hell, and then someone else is like, no, hell doesn't exist, and then it's like, this is heresy, and it's like, no, this is just being loving, and it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
it's
just like this
back and
friction
forth.
is just nonstop, and it's really. So when you're having conversation, like just community dinner kind of stuff, that's where a lot of this stems out of, because it's just having these kind of conversations like, I don't understand, or this pisses me off, or this is that and this, and it's like sitting in a mush pot together and kind of like sorting through and trying to keep that core nugget at the middle, like, okay, this is what matters the most. We know that,
right?
Like I'm clinging to the fabric at the bottom of his cloak and focusing on that and trying to block out the noise. And just be like, I'm still here. I'm still like, I'm looking forward. I'm holding on. I'm pushing forward. But all this static and this friction is frustrating.
But would you be open to the possibility that the static and the friction is exactly the kind of improvisation that's required by the life of faith? And
absolutely.
And that's the best stuff. And we hate it because, the struggle is real, as our friends say, but as you even describe that, I'm like, yeah, but that's where the best stuff happens, and
absolutely,
and it's horrible.
Let me quantify that too. Like I learned the most through that, like through conversation and argument and whatever, right? Like, that's where I learned the most. Like when I went to college, it was during the 2000. It was Bush Gore election, whatever, 2000. And I was like, I grew up in a conservative household. I'm going to vote for George Bush. Yeah. But when I went up to that Christian campus, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go as far left as possible. I don't understand anything, but I'm going to go as far left as possible and just sit down at tables and have conversations to learn why my tribe believes what it believes. And then I found that no one really knew why in this setting. And this is not a global, but I learned so much through the conflict and the friction. So yes, I just like it's the static view from the outside and the infighting and the whatever that from people who are outside of that looking in, being like, this is what a mess.
You know what? It's interesting you said that, because I agree, because for us it makes sense. Like, oh, we're working this out. We're trying to figure it out or whatever. I had a friend just tell me last week, she's like, I didn't grow up in the church. She became a Christian in her 30s. And she's like, and then I got to church and they had all this hierarchy and roles and rules that nobody else has, and it's confusing because I decided to follow Jesus because I wanted to be free, and then I walked into this setting that had all these rules, and now I don't know what to do about it. And she's like, and I don't understand why everyone keeps talking about it, because there's bigger issues. And it like kind of blew my mind, because I grew up in the church. So to me, I'm like, no, we're doing the good, necessary work. But to an outsider, Tim, like you just said, it feels like archaic and crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I apologize. This is not, I'm riffing off the top of my head, so this is not thought out. And I realized that this was a lot of
Tim, I'm here for it. You just bring
left
it.
field.
I like
Tim,
left field, Tim.
The fact that you think anything is thought out that is happening on this is highly disappointing.
It tells us maybe you have not been here.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's the riffing bit is the part that's so disorienting, because there's some who say you can't riff at all. You know, you can't improvise at all, and we'd say no. I see permission to do. Not only do I see permission to do it, but I see the absolute necessity as we keep encountering situations we've never seen before, right? The church has never had to wrestle with before. And so in a lot of cases we're hitting stuff that the church has dealt with, but man, more and more, it's just not the case. And so we have to riff, and there is conflict. The problem, of course, is that we broadcast it. It produces clicks, and it's we've ceased, and that's why the MacArthur thing was so offensive. I mean, it wouldn't have gained any traction had John said, "Hey, I really disagree with her role and platform. I think God has gifted women, no question about it, but I don't think that a woman should be teaching." If that's all he said, everyone would have said, "Well, yeah, you're John MacArthur. Of course, that's what you think."
Yeah.
It's when the attack goes personal and vicious and demeaning that you're like, well, okay.
But to the point of one of our listeners, what he said too, I really enjoyed that, and I thought Alan did a really good job of just saying like, "Hey, the way he spoke wasn't okay." Is one of our listeners said, "Gosh, what got me about that is if I was at like a big deconstruction conference and somebody played that game and said John MacArthur, and someone said go home, I probably would have found myself laughing." And it was like, oh yeah, like we can all be guilty of all these things no matter what side you land on. And not even necessarily what side you land on. Sometimes it's more about how you're even approaching it and how you're discussing it.
Yes. Sorry, I keep trying to come in, but Bonnie, you've hit the point behind Tim's question that I was desperately meandering my way to, which is so much of the problem isn't the view, but it's how it's held.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
and so fundamentalism, yes, was a set of doctrines to counter liberalism in the early 20th century, but now that word connotes the idea that you're holding something rigidly apart from any nuance, mystery, process. And that's why even in our letter to spiritually homeless people, we refer to the dueling fundamentalisms of conservative progressive Christianity, right? Because there's still excommunication, there's still demeaning, there's still humiliation, and none of that is of Jesus. None of it is of Jesus. Doesn't matter whether... because both positions claim self-righteousness and whatever else. And so much of what you're seeing and reacting to, I think, Tim, is how poorly held all of these views are. And that's why, you pull someone like Alan on and you're like, okay, this guy's not a jerk. This guy is reasonable. This guy loves his wife and loves Jesus and loves the Bible. And we disagree with him, but here's a nuanced version of this that doesn't get a lot of airplay, right? So I think that's important. And so, Bonnie, when you bring that up about how it is that we hold things, that's why I can't get on board with some versions of progressive Christianity either, because you're just like, well, no, you're just repackaging around a new ideology the same practices, and it's those practices I want to get rid of altogether.
Yeah, agreed.
Tim, does that make sense?
Yeah, and you guys don't have to answer this. This was the original kind of question was, if we are being held accountable on this idea of Judgment Day, that we will stand before God and He will blah 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 blah. And this is what the pastor guy was talking to me, just like this fear of this judgment. I just don't know. It's all these conflicting ideas and the constant revelation and that revealing that changes some of the aspects of what those things that people are preaching judgment are about. Does that make sense? Like,
yes.
I just don't know what we would be held accountable to exactly, which creates this huge cloud of fear with people that are like, I don't even know anymore. Like, am I being judged on this? Was this wrong because now it's right? Is this wrong because now they're saying this is right?
What if you're being judged on doing something with it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm at this point, I'm just clinging to like the love the Lord your God and love your neighbor, and holding those kind of things there and being like, okay, I can focus on those. I can do those to the best of my ability and hope that is, when Jesus was like, these are the two big ones, man. Run with these. I'm like, all right, cool, man. I'm going to run with those. So it's just like this idea of all this kind of stuff, because that's at the root of all this, right? This heresy and these disagreements as like, this is what is right and this is what is wrong.
Yeah,
and
like you
is-
will
is-
hear about it someday if you're wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, well, I don't know, man. What am I getting judged on? Because according to certain camps, I'm going to be judged on a lot.
Right.
And according
Here,
to other
here.
camps, I'm not going to be judged on anything, but it's all under the same umbrella.
Oh, this is so good.
It's so true because there's so many conservatives would say you're going to be judged on this, and the liberal and the progressives would say you're going to be judged on this, and you're like, well, what? Which is it?
Yep. Well,
And then there's other people who are like, you're not going to be judged at all. There is no judgment. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
I know. I think we need to. I think this is a new podcast topic.
Yeah, so that's why I was saying we don't need to address that, but it's just that was the
I'm
root
dying.
of this question.
I am dying. Man, I've so many bouncing thoughts, but you're right, Tim. It needs to be a new episode.
I think
Damn
I
you.
said that.
As Snoop would say the next
And
episode.
Bonnie.
You know what? Forget.
But Bonnie,
I
Tim
disagreed
said it
with Tim
as a
basically the whole
man,
time.
and so
I know I
heard
have so
it.
many more things that I wrote down
I love
that
it.
we didn't even get to because I derailed it. I'm sorry, but there's
Oh,
good ones
quit.
about like strong leadership in a man may took like chauvinism. I thought that was an interesting
Right?
quote.
Yep. And I had, of course, some theological disagreements. When he would say, well, what do you do with this passage? And I would
Yeah.
think, well, here's what I would do with that passage. So, but the bigger point is always trying to model the very thing that you're reacting against, Tim, which is, okay, we have far more in common than we have held in difference. And how do you be firm in your convictions and gentle and humble and teachable? And, it's very, very hard. But that judgment thing, there's so much. Bro, so much self-control right now. So much self-control is not being
You are the model of
exercised.
self-control right now.
Oh,
Look at you.
yes. Oh, yes.
But I mean, with what you just said too, I think that the conversation that you had with Alan and having that conversation that way is a great model of that. Like
Hopefully.
having disagreement, but doing that in respect and love and hearing, and so.
You know the problem, Bonnie, we're going to get now after this episode? We're going to get all this, like, Tim needs to talk more stuff.
I know there's going to be
And-
reviews.
I know. And frankly, I agree.
I love it. When you say to yourself, this should be your new litmus test. If you say to yourself, this idea or what I was going to say is left field, then that's a green light. That means go.
That's
say
automatically
Go.
green light.
it. Say it.
Absolutely. Dude, you've just, yeah. All right.
I love it.
So, anyway, check out Alan online. Check out Southlands Church if you're in North Orange County. They really are a great, great community. So thank you to him for coming on. Thank you, as always, to Bonnie and Tim. And thank you to you. We are fully a 501c3 nonprofit funded by listeners like you. And so if you go to voxpodcast.com and you're so inclined, you can participate in supporting of the Vox Podcast in a couple of different ways you can read about there. My friends, thank you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you and in these days give you peace. Until next time, friends, thanks.